Welcome to Limitless, the Blind Beginnings podcast where seeing things differently inspires limitless possibilities. This podcast is being brought to you by Blind Beginnings, an organization based in Vancouver, Canada, that supports children and youth who are blind or partially sighted, along with their families. Limitless was created in order to inform, educate, entertain, and share stories from within the blind and partially sighted community, in order to show the world that the opportunities for those who are blind or partially sighted are truly limitless. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to your host, the Executive Director and founder of Blind Beginnings, Shawn Marcellet.
Welcome back to Limitless, the Blind Beginnings podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Marcellet, and thank you so much for joining us again this week. I want to start by introducing my co-host, Kolby. Hi, Kolby. How are you doing today?
Hi, everyone. I'm good, and I'm excited to be here this morning.
Do you want to remind our listeners who you are, where you're from, your level of vision?
My name is Kolby, and I'm from Trail, BC, and I've been a member of Blind Beginnings for quite some time now, and I'm totally blind, but I used to be able to see quite a bit, so I have a pretty good idea of what most things look like.
So I'm so excited. We have a wonderful guest with us today. We are talking to the Executive Director of VocalEye, which is a nonprofit society registered charity and the first live descriptive arts service for the blind in Canada. Welcome, Steph Kirkland.
Thanks so much, Shawn and Kolby. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We should start off by explaining what does VocalEye do? And I feel like you would be better to explain that than me. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the organization?
Okay, thanks, Shawn. I will try to make it brief. So before the pandemic, we were describing live theater and events in and around Vancouver and the Lower Mainland. So we also were in Surrey, Richmond, Victoria, and the North Shore. So fairly local. Once the pandemic hit, we just had to rethink everything. So the services that we offered live, we would go to the theater, our describers would watch the production, and then we would create a description for it. There would be a day chosen in the run of the performance where we would describe that show live for our guests. And we would set up our equipment in the lobby. We would have theater buddies who were trained in sighted guiding available to meet people at a designated meetup location to escort them to the venue and assist them there, especially for venues that were harder to get at, like the ones theaters on Granville Island, for instance. And then we just the year before the pandemic hit, we also started hosting what we called notable socials with Amy Amanti, where we would, use that meetup. We would just meet up a little bit earlier and have a social event. So there was we were doing all kinds of things like this, and we would describe fireworks, and we did a training at the Vancouver Art Gallery. So to facilitate their described monthly tours there. So we were doing a lot of a broad range of events during the summer. Bard on the Beach, the Arts Club, the Surrey Arts Center, and a number of other partners. So that's what we were doing. And then we just had to kind of see if we could transform those activities and services into a virtual format. So.
Okay, before we go to the virtual format, you said a lot. And there is a lot there. It's more than just describing the theater production, or like the fact that you factored in buddies to, be a guide to meet somebody and get them to the theater and back to the SkyTrain after, and train those people, and the social aspect. Like, you're really encompassing more than just the play or the theater production that you're watching.
Yeah, we think it's really important because it's more than just going to the theater. It's about building a community. And one of the things that I noticed really early on when we first started doing this in the theaters was people would come to the table to pick up their equipment and say hello to us, but they would miss each other. And they wouldn't know, they would come when they dropped their equipment off at the end of the show. Was anybody else here? Who else was here?
Right.
So unless people actually arrived around the same time and bumped into each other at the table and to say hello, they wouldn't know who else was there. And so I just thought, well, yeah, you don't want to feel like you're the only person coming. So the more things that we can offer, and then totally optional for people to connect. Not everybody wants to do that, but for people who do, we just want to create as many options as we can for people to connect around art and food, if at all possible, too. So that's our major priorities in life. And then when we had the opportunity to describe theater, to describe productions that I thought would be really interesting, but on Granville Island, which is a really difficult venue. Mm-hmm. And with how can we help people get there? Because it's very challenging. So that's how the Theater Buddy idea came to be. It's like, okay, well, we just started out with the describers. We learned basic principles of sighted guiding, and we offered to meet our patrons at a transit location and guide them down to the venue and assist them. And that's how it started. So.
That's awesome.
I'm also curious to know, what made you start VocalEye, and are you visually impaired, or how did you get started with it?
Oh, thanks for asking, Kolby. I should have mentioned that off the top. I'm a sighted person, and I have a theater background. So I was trained as an actor originally at Studio 58, and then I started directing as well. So the directing kind of took over. I got an MFA in directing, and I was doing that for a number of years and as a freelancer. And one of my other jobs was recording textbooks for students with sight loss and other what are called print impairments. It used to be called SILS. It's called CAPER now. Mm-hmm. And I was doing that for the 2 decades that I was directing and performing. So when the call came out for people to learn how to describe theater for people who are blind, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that these two parts of my life were coming together like that. I'd never heard of audio description for theater. I didn't know such a thing existed. And indeed, this was the first launching of it in Canada by Kickstart Disability Arts and Culture. They were the ones that got the ball rolling on this. They offered the very first training in 2009. And they were the ones who laid the foundation for this. So that's how it all started. I auditioned and was trained as a describer. And so it really brings those two areas of my life together. I have obviously a strong theater background, so I have a sense of how stories are told, of what to look for, of what the choices that are made visually when we stage something, and how we can communicate those ideas and what's important to the story. So it was a huge learning curve for me, to find out how to do this. Yeah. So it's been, every project is different. So it really keeps me engaged and excited, and the rewards are huge.
Can you talk a little bit about how the script is written for the description? What's the process for creating, what you're going to say when you're the one describing?
Right. So when I would go to the theater, to watch the show, and the first time kind of to get a sense of how things go, how never having seen it before, where my responses are, where do I laugh, where do I, where am I what are my responses? Because those, I have to make notes of those, because I want to make sure that if I need to supply something, some information, so that I can facilitate that kind of response in our listeners. So that's the first. And then I will return a couple of times. Before we had the luxury of getting access to video, I would have to go to the theater a number of times, and I would make notes in the dark about all the. So when I'm making my notes, I'm looking for two things, because I have to create two scripts essentially. The first script is the pre-show notes. So that's an introduction to the design elements and the context. What is the world of this play? Where are we? who's there, what do people look like, what are the locations, and those kinds of things. So I create notes for that, and then create a script for that I will share with the audience about 10 minutes before the show starts. We do a sound check, and then I'll do the pre-show introduction. And then the other notes that I'm making are action notes. So these are the notes, these are the visual, this is the visual information that happens during the show that isn't apparent to the listener. So, and that takes some, I have to listen to the show as much as I watch it to know what's essential, what's missing. I don't want to be redundant and tell you things that are already apparent in the dialogue, and, but I don't want to give too much. And then of course I have to put that description in between the lines, because I can't step on the actor's lines. So it takes a lot of practice and timing to get just the right, to come in on my cue, because it just feels like there's half a breath in there sometimes to get information in, and to make sure that what information I'm giving you is important to the story and to your experience of the story.
I have to say, those pre-show, it's so funny because I usually go to the theater with somebody sighted who doesn't have the headset. And so we're in our seats and they're just chatting to me about whatever as we're waiting for the show to start. And I'm kind of like, shush, I'm trying to listen. I want to get the description of the set and the costumes and the character. You give a really good sort of setup so that when it starts, I kind of have a framework of like, where are we in this scene and who are the players and what do they look like? It's fabulous.
Oh, great. Thanks. Because we don't have time to give all that information when the show is happening. So to kind of front load things, if possible. In an ideal world, we would try to get that information to our guests in advance, so you could review it at your leisure and not have to compete with listening to us and chatting with your friends who've come to the theater with you. But that was something that we continue to work on, and we will continue to try to find other ways to do that, other options for people. Yeah.
Well, it's also cool because as I'm listening, I can say, oh, like now I know what they're seeing. If they're seeing the set, I don't know. Sometimes the curtains are open and you can see something before the show starts if you're sighted. So, I can ask for more from my sighted friend or just comment as part of conversation because I know what they're looking at as well. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been to quite a few VocalEye events, and I guess I compare it to what life was like before for me. If I would go to the theater, I really like musicals. A lot of things can happen during a song, for example, or I don't know. I mean, I saw Cats in England when I was living there, and I fell asleep. So.
Oh, no.
Yeah, like that's tragic, right? But I didn't have a clue what was going on. I don't think I still know the plot of that show. So
oh, no.
when there's audio description, it really changes the game. It really makes it such a more meaningful experience. And I used to say like theater is easier to follow than TV because the action can't be as crazy on stage and the movements are bigger and maybe it's a little bit easier to kind of figure out, but you still, if you can't see, you're definitely missing a lot.
Yeah, we do have an advantage. The film being it's so visual and they can do so much, so much of their storytelling is absolutely visual. We have usually the plays are written in a way that rely on dialogue and narrative. And so there is a story to follow and there's not a lot of bells and whistles, but big Broadway musicals, of course. Yeah. And you've got all kinds of fantastic sets and, costumes and all of those things that we want to be able to share. Hamilton was something that recently the film version where there was description provided, I believe, but some of the comments from the community were, I'm missing all of that information about the design, because there's just no time for that. So our colleagues in the UK, VocalEye's UK, created a pre-show description that they made available for people who, just in response to the community demand. So I think that's still available on their website. But yeah, so it's that's one of the many challenges of getting information that's essential to the listener in a way that doesn't step all over everything or become too distracting.
Yeah. Another thing I really appreciate in the theater, when there's an intermission, the description will also include where the bathrooms are as you leave the theater, which is just like really practical and important information that if you're there by yourself, that's probably something you need to know.
Yeah, we're trying to think of everything. I mean, a lot of what we're doing it comes from the community. It's just really being in the theater with the community, meeting our patrons, and finding out what questions they ask and what kind of assistance they would like that would be helpful, and just to put it out there so that they don't have to always ask, or that they can rely on us, and to be consistent with the information and services that we provide was also really important. Touch tours were something that we were able to offer for some productions. They're especially for theater for young audiences when we worked with Carousel, and some of our arts club, some of the arts club shows that featured puppets or that had a lot of interesting props. I think we did a touch tour for Mary Poppins and for
Wizard of Oz.
Wizard of Oz, Avenue Q, which was a bit more adult, the adult use of puppets, and Cat in the Hat also. So this is also a wonderful opportunity for the community to meet members of the cast and the crew, and to touch objects, to have a sensory experience, a little tour of the set, and to find out how some of the props are made, and learn about some of the special effects that may be in the show. And we had to adapt how traditionally, because Canada's so late in the game doing this, our colleagues in the UK really pioneered the touch tour, the art of the touch tour, shall we say, and they offer their tours before the show.
That would be really helpful, because then you have a good idea of things that are gonna be in the show.
Exactly. And you get to meet people. You can sometimes meet the actors and hear their voices, but that way you get the layout. But one of the drawbacks of the pre-show touch tour is that we can't give you any spoilers. So we don't want to spoil anything that might be our surprises that are coming up. So there are some limitations, and people do have to arrive quite a bit earlier to the theater. And that model we found just didn't work with our theater partners, with union houses and their budgets. We couldn't make it happen, but they really wanted to offer a touch tour. So the compromise that we came to is, well, what about a touch tour after the show? And everybody seemed to say, oh, okay, because then we can relax. Everybody's a bit more relaxed after the show. There's not so much the time constraints of, oh, I've got to get that prop back. Well, we have to get everybody off the stage and get ready to do the show. And, there's so much more to do before a show. So everybody could be a bit more relaxed. We could have more people participate. And it's a bit of a different experience, obviously, for our patrons. The pre-show notes, we try to give people as much information as possible, and then you have the experience. So you're sort of layering information in after the fact. So you've already created your own impressions, and then in the touch tour you find out more information. So you're kind of layering it on top after the fact, which is it's just a different experience. I think there's I think pros and cons to both approaches, but at least we've been able to offer touch tours after. And this again is a way for people to meet each other and to connect and find out more about how theater is done and made, and how it works.
In addition to live theater, you've also done live, like I've been to the Vancouver Pride Parade, or the fireworks. So, I mean, that's not something you're going to get a sneak preview of beforehand. Is that really challenging?
Super challenging. Trying to describe something cold is just,
yeah.
So with the Pride Parade, the advantage we have there is there's no dialogue to try to fit ourselves around. So the describers have the freedom to describe, anytime. And but because the parade is such a long event, like it's a 3-hour tour essentially, so
right.
we it's a lot for one person to do. So we have a team. So we have 2 describers, and we get a list of the participants. So we do have a running order of who's participating and how they're coming along, the order that they're coming in the parade. So one of the describers usually reads out that information about the organization, about the participants, and then the other will describe the visuals, of that float, and then they switch roles back and forth, and as we go. So that's how we sort of figured out how to do that one. And for the fireworks, it really is, we give folks a little crash. We usually host a free workshop for people to get some basic techniques and how to do it, to practice in. And then we just all show up, and we make it a social event. So we show up, we meet, find a meetup location and time, and through the city and other our other partners, we've arranged special seating at the fireworks, because again, that's really important. We found that people want to be right in the center of the action. We would assume that, English Bay, people don't want to be just too much for people to be there. So one year we did try describing fireworks at Vanier Park, and it just wasn't the same. So again, it's really, we're responding to what our patrons want, and they want to be right in the middle of the action. So it's okay, how do we facilitate that? So we do this meetup in advance, and we have seating that's accessible, with washrooms that are right nearby and accessible. And then we have afterwards. This is part of how the social idea came up, was through our firework activities. We would meet afterwards. We would all go to a restaurant afterwards, and while the crowds thinned out.
Yes.
So we'd make a reservation there, and then we'd all just kind of go and have a beverage and a snack, and we would spring for appetizers for everyone. And it's again that kind of, you have the rush of that intense half hour of fireworks, and it's a way to kind of burn that off, and then the crowds disperse, and then we could all ride share or whatever to go home. So it's all of that logistical planning for the event. It's accessibility is more, as you say, it's more than just providing the description. It's the whole experience that we're trying to facilitate and make accessible.
You've done some unique things with the fireworks. Do you want to talk about that? The tactile component?
So how do we describe fireworks? So that was the big question. And I didn't even know, when Colin Van Ushelen, who was on our board, asked me if I'd ever thought of describing fireworks, if we'd ever done it, and I had to admit, it had never occurred to me. And it really hit me that I didn't even know that I was making assumptions, and I was, that people who are blind wouldn't be interested in fireworks being described. So that was a huge and important lesson for me, luckily really early in my VocalEye career. So again, these are assumptions sighted people have that they don't even know they have. And part of what VocalEye tries to do as well is to point these things out and say, hey, we can't assume anything. We need to ask. And so the next thing was, okay, Colin, I'm up for it. How do we make fireworks accessible? So we went down to English Bay together, and I attempted to describe fireworks the way I would describe anything verbally. And I did. Colin was very familiar with the jargon and the names of these effects, so I did a little research the day before, and did my best. And and it was like, oh my gosh, I felt like I was yelling, and I was just repeating this, and it ended up repeating the same thing over and over again, because the effects would red chrysanthemum, golden peony, and it felt very limited, and it was incredibly stressful because I didn't know what was coming next. And it's so not being able to prepare, not ever having done it before, I just felt I did a terrible job. Colin was very gracious, and just right at the end of the fireworks, they usually do a huge, spectacular blowout of, a whole bunch of effects at once. And at the end of this particular event, there was like a wall of gold, like a shower of golden rain, really. And so there was really slowly falling gold effects, and there was one clump of ash. So some of the material had just sort of clumped together like a glowing ember, but it was falling quite slowly. And I was mentioning this to Colin. He said, "Oh, trace the fall on my arm, like how the speed it's going and when it goes out." So I did that, and it was at that moment that we both kind of, like the bell, something happened. We realized, that was the most satisfying part of the description,
right,
that I attempted. And so from there, it was okay, how do we do this then, if that's a way in? So looking at the body, so the largest canvas on the body is the back. And so having a describer stand behind our guest who has sight loss and watch the fireworks. So we're both facing the fireworks, and the describer then attempts to draw the fireworks on the person's back. So this way we found so we did a workshop to see if that actually would work, using videos of fireworks and trying out different techniques and looking at some common effects, and using different areas of the back to represent the location. So the lower back would be the effects coming from the barge on the water, and the shoulders and mid back are the main area where most of the effects happen. And then if anything was higher up, we could even possibly use the person's head. But before we did any of that, we would always check in with the person. Is it all right for us to touch you there? Or would you prefer a different part of your body, or your hand, or just your arm, or we could focus on a leg, or we could, wherever you would like. But we started with the back. And so we're able to communicate things like the composition, so where the effects are located, the intensity of the effects with using different pressure of our fingertips, and the motion, the speed, the rhythm, all of those kinds of things we were able to communicate that we couldn't with our voice. So then we could use our voice to communicate things that we couldn't with our fingers, such as the color and any other kind of metaphorical imagery, poetic imagery that
that's so great
experience. So yeah,
because who the heck knows what a chrysanthemum or a peony is?
Yeah,
I don't.
I was gonna say, I have no idea what that is. I know they're flowers, but
yeah,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, and you also have trained like family members and friends and partners so that they can do. So if you're not comfortable going to the fireworks and having a volunteer, a stranger, draw on your back, you can bring your loved one and they can learn how, right?
That's right. And we created a series of instructional videos, if you were, as it were, because this is a technique that itself should be accessible to everyone. So that it's free, it's easy. We don't need any special gadgets or technology. Just a friend or someone who's willing to, and it's the relationships and the connection that we make. The human connection has always been very important to us at VocalEye. So anytime we can avoid technology, and that's a good thing. So
well, that's a good segue for virtual. So how have you been doing things during the pandemic?
Oh gosh. Well,
and it must have been, just before you even say that, I can't even imagine. Well, I can, of course, I lived through it too. But being in the business that you're in, obviously live theater, any, large gatherings instantly just ended. Like that must have been really tough to like, what are we going to do now?
Exactly. That was exactly it. We had 30 events booked.
Oh no.
Between March 11th and August, the end of August.
Right.
And they all came. We just had to cancel all of them. And so in March of 2020, it was okay. That existential moment, like when I really had to assess, what would happen if VocalEye just disappeared right now, because that's what we're looking at, right?
Yeah.
So, and then it was, okay, I think some things would be lost. So what is that? Our community that we've spent so many years building together, the connections that we've made with people who are blind and partially sighted, and the training that we've put in with our team. That would be, everybody, I could just imagine, I could foresee this big scattering. We would all scatter and do other things, and trying to get people back, to get this back after a year or more, because I knew it was going to kind of stretch on. It would be impossible. So that was that. So how do we then translate what we were doing to an online format? Everybody was doing watch parties. So it was like, well, that just seems obvious, doesn't it? But how can we do it in a way that's true to what we do value? We don't have a lot of resources. We don't have, we have a MacGyver sensibility. So it's like, okay, what have we got to work with? I have a laptop and a Zoom account. Okay, what can we do? And I have a team that's amazing. So how can we translate what they're already doing into this online format? So starting with Amy, it's, bringing that social element to Zoom. So obviously she was the natural person to host our events. And then we include a virtual lobby aspect. So people always have the opportunity to socialize and get community updates before our events.
Oh, cool.
And then and then it's like, okay, we need content. How do we find that? And it's, so we could, suddenly there was an opportunity for us to create our own content. What artists in the community do we know that have an exhibit or have a film or have something described, or that we could either describe and help them make accessible, or that's already accessible that we can bring to our audience, and then also bring that guest. So instead of a touch tour, we're actually bringing guests in who are involved with the project, or a describer will come in and do a pre-show intro as we've done before. So that's kind of how it shaped up. And then also in terms of the social, we mentioned that food is so important to us, and being able to break bread together. And so it was always important for us to make sure that was accessible. So we included that in our budget always, that shouldn't be a barrier. If you want to join us for coffee and a snack, we're going to spring for that. So you don't have to feel that, if that's that we don't want that to be a barrier. So translating that as well, it's like, so we have a little draw. So we always have a draw, and it's kind of like usually a food related gift certificate. Our pals at Moose's Down Under, who have been so incredibly helpful to all of us hosting events and fundraisers for your organization and mine. The difficulty they've been through the pandemic. So we would buy gift certificates and give those out, and other food related things. So again, just trying to, identifying what we were doing live, and how do we transform it online? So
and
that's
how
what
has
we've come
it
up with.
How's it been going?
We were amazed at the response, really. So folks are tuning in from, again, areas that we would never, people who couldn't come to any of our events live are able to join us on Zoom. So all across the province, across Canada, guests from the United States. And so and the numbers and the feedback have just been amazing. So for instance, I think we were averaging about 8 patrons for our live events. It would depend on the event. So from anywhere from 2 to 20 people coming to our events, and which was great. That was actually a really good number. But now we're averaging maybe 40 people on a Zoom call.
Wow.
So this is, and the variety of material that we're able to present people, to bring to people. We've lowered the barrier. Zoom has magically lowered the barriers that were the most difficult for us to address. The barriers of transportation, and price.
Right. Yeah.
So, and Zoom, thankfully, is so accessible for our members. You can use so many different devices. You can call in on a landline or use your phone or computer. So that's not a barrier. So, really, it became clear as people participated and gave us feedback that this is now actually going to become a center of our service. And we will bring live events in, hopefully, sometime soon, at some point. But we'll bring those in as well. But we're not going to give up this incredible platform and way to share the arts with people and the way to build community.
Oh, wow. That's fabulous. I know we've had a similar realization. We were trying to be virtual to reach beyond Metro Vancouver for a year before the pandemic, and just people were not really doing it. They weren't joining, and I was trying different days of the week and different times. And then of course, when it's all you have, all of a sudden people are willing to give it a try, and it's changed the game for us too. We're just way more accessible to more people now. And we're definitely going to have to continue a lot of our virtual programming, because if we don't, we're leaving out. Now we know we're leaving out, all these people, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's
So what is it going to look like then when life resumes? You're going to continue some virtual, you're going to still do live stuff as well. Are you going to do less live stuff? Like, what are you thinking?
I think necessarily it has to be less. We were doing about 60 live events before the pandemic, and I don't know that I think it's going to take some time for our theater partners to come back. Some of our partners will be coming back sooner than others, but not with I don't think as much perhaps programming. So, the art stuff, for instance, we would describe 10 or 11 productions a year, and we may return with 4 or 5, something like that. And it'll be mostly our larger partners that I think will have the capacity to come back and bring us back. We want to make sure that we're in a situation that's pretty much like pre-pandemic. So audiences of 50, for instance, are too small for us to ask people to come back. We want to make sure that most of the population has had their second dose, and we want to, in consultation, again, always with the community, how do you feel? Do you feel safe going back? When you feel safe, we'll do it. And I think we're going to work more with a partnership model. So it will be with our partners that really understand how to collaborate, what our process is, that it's more than just, showing up and describing their event. All these other things have to be factored in. The accessibility of the venue, affordable tickets, touch tours if possible, and socials and other amenities that we can bring.
So quality, not quantity.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's probably how we'll be moving forward, I think.
Oh, right. We have to talk about Alice in Wonderland, because we're promoting one of your upcoming events. And I haven't been to a virtual event yet. I know I think they're Wednesday nights, and we have programming, and I often have meetings Wednesday nights. So I'm so excited that we're going to be, for Blind Beginnings is promoting this Alice in Wonderland as a community discovery outing in July. It's July 14th, I think. What can we expect at this event?
Oh, I'm so glad you're going to be available. It's a musical version of Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, even better.
So it really is. I'm an adult, I've been around a long time, and I just found the production absolutely delightful, and there's a lot in it that's contemporary and modern. And so there's a white rabbit with a watch, and who's late.
Right.
And she ends up following him down the rabbit hole and encountering all of these really bizarre creatures and adventures. She drinks things and eats things that make her grow really big and really small. And she meets the Red Queen, and it's an amazing story. So this theater company is called Bad Hats Theater. They're an associate company with Soul Pepper in Toronto. And these are artist-based companies. So they're run by artists. Bad Hats is primarily creating new works for young audiences, well, for families. So this is a theatrical performance created for film. So they staged it in Toronto on stage and filmed it. And they used, so it really, in a true sense, is a hybrid production. So they actually used some of the fact that they were filming it to help them create some of the illusions of, like when Alice gets really big, they've framed her and filmed her in such a way that she totally fills the square of the screen. So it's very cleverly staged. The songs are fantastic, and it takes place. They've set it in a context of a classroom. So Alice is a student, and she's coming into class, and there's a mysterious little Cheshire cat that sort of wanders through, and then she's joined by her classmates, and then the school day begins. We meet the teacher, and they have an assignment, and one of the assignments is that question that we all get asked: what do you want to be when you grow up? And yeah, I'm still asking that question, but it's, right? It's just kids are asked that all the time. So taking from that kind of very familiar premise, then Alice is looking out the window and happens to see a white rabbit, and then the adventure begins, and it's just so fabulous. Yeah. And as I say, the talent in this company and the songs, all the original songs, the adaptation, that's really fabulous. And it's being described by one of our describers, Eileen Barrett.
Awesome. Yeah. It's going to be, I'm really excited. I've sort of been waiting for a title that I recognize that was, family friendly. And I'm sure there've been several, but this one caught my attention and thought, okay, we need to do this.
Yeah. It's a fabulous production. Yeah.
I'm so relieved that things have worked out for VocalEye. I really personally appreciate the job that you do and the service that you provide. It's definitely made a difference in my life. I think gone are the days when I have to go to theater and have the person whispering what's happening and all the people around us giving them the stink eye. So it's just so nice to be able to know everything that's happening and know that you're not being disruptive to anybody else around you. And just, you've been so creative in some of the things you've come up with, and, the parade type idea, the fireworks, it's phenomenal. So thank you.
Well, thanks. Well, thank you. Thank you for all your support over the years. You've been with us from the beginning, 2009, I think when we started, and it's so without the participation of the community and you telling us what you think and what you need and what's missing and what you like and what you don't like, that's how we do it. It's really just responding to the comments and requests of the community in our MacGyver way, with whatever we've got available. We'll try to make it happen. So it's been so exciting, that collaboration.
That's great.
When we have permission, usually when we create our own content, we record all of our events. And we record all of our events, but the content that we create, we're able to post all of it on our YouTube channel for an event like this, because we're not able to, we don't have the rights for the actual show. We'll be recording the pre-show and post-show conversations and putting those on our YouTube. But the musical will also be available on the Soul Pepper site, but it's a paid pay-per-view, but there'll be a discount code So after every event, we always send out a follow-up email with links and other information about the show and about our partners, so that people will get that. And we'll also share in the newsletter for anyone who missed that particular show. If it's still available, we'll send that information out in the newsletter.
That is an important thing we forgot to say. These virtual events are free. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, that's right. Yes, they are.
Like,
that barrier that we talked about, gone.
Yeah,
Yep.
Free. Can you believe that? All you listeners, I can't believe that. Free.
Yeah. So you get to, you can try things out without taking any risks. You're not going to lose any money or time. You can always, if you don't like it, like if you think, oh, they're doing opera tonight, I don't know if I like opera or not, but I can tune in and find out.
Yeah.
Tonight we have special guests from NASA. We have some a scientist who's making the cosmos more accessible through sonification, and we'll have a visual artist joining us too, a science illustrator. So they're going to talk about how they make the invisible visible in different ways.
Wow. Wow.
So that's tonight at
okay
6:30.
Okay, so how if people are interested in either getting connected with VocalEye, wanting to attend an event, a virtual event, or in person down the road, or maybe volunteer, like how do people get in touch with you?
The easiest way is just to send me an email, info, INFO, at VocalEye, VOCALEYE.ca.
Well, thank you so much, Steph, for joining us. This has been so fantastic. I'm so excited for Alice in Wonderland. I'm so relieved that VocalEye is still going strong, doing better than ever, and even more accessible than you were to begin with, which who knew was even possible. But thank you.
Thank you, Shawn. And I'm thrilled that things are going so well for you as well. This is awesome. So awesome.
Yeah. And thanks, Kolby, for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me. I've definitely had a great time.
You've been listening to Limitless, the Blind Beginnings podcast. If you have a question, a comment, a future topic request, please send us an email to limitless@blindbeginnings.ca. Share our podcast with a friend, leave us a rating or a review, and join us next time.
This podcast has been brought to you by Blind Beginnings, an organization based in Vancouver, Canada, that supports children and youth who are blind or partially sighted, along with their families. Music for this podcast is composed by Shawn Bishop and Clement Chow. Production and audio editing by Rob Minot. For more information about Blind Beginnings and the work it does to support children and youth who are blind and partially sighted, along with their families, visit us on the web at www.blindbeginnings.ca, and also remember to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.